Wanted to ask everybody, did everybody get sermon notes this morning? Okay, yeah. Well, I hope you can follow me, all right? Because sometimes this has been difficult for me because I do have an outline, but then sometimes I just follow where the Lord has taken me. I do some extemporaneous speaking. And so I'm not going to follow this like a straitjacket, okay? But I've also joked with everybody that I handed these out to. I said, hey, if you can guess the blanks and fill them out before I preach, you can just fill them out, turn in like a homework assignment. You don't even have to listen, okay? But did anybody not get sermon notes this morning? Okay, great. Thank you, ushers, for doing that. Well, we had and we are still going to be doing the series called Building the Kingdom, but I'm going to interrupt this series to share a singular message out of Joshua chapter 1. And I believe this is a timely, relevant word for us. And I feel like I've been walking through a prophetic scenario because next Sunday, I was asked by a church in town that's celebrating their 4th anniversary, an African church in town that we've connected with that pastor, and they asked me to come celebrate with them and preach at their 4th anniversary as a congregation, and they assigned me this text. And so I just said, okay, I'm good with that. Normally, I don't like to have text assigned to me. I kind of like to say, Lord, what do you want to say to this congregation? But as I opened up this text and I began to look at it, I quickly began to feel like the Lord had set me up. And as we finish the message today, we're going to be sharing some things, real-time things that are going on within our church. And I can't share everything, but I'm just going to give everybody a heads up that we're just kind of in a real prophetic moment as a congregation and a moment of transition. And I believe we're involved in a prophetic scenario that's unfolding. And it's neat to see God, to watch what God is doing. God always takes us further and farther than we think that our faith could go. But in the processes, He raises our vision, He raises our faith. And I think you'll know what I'm talking about when I finish. But I want us to go over to Joshua chapter 1, and I'm going to read verses 1 through 6. And I'm going to entitle this message this morning, Arise. And verse 1, it says, after the death of Moses, and Larry, I'm sorry, if you could turn me down. Up here, I don't need a lot of monitors, so I feel like I'm getting a lot of feedback through the monitors. And so if you could just quiet it on the stage for me a little bit. So it says, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, Moses, my servant is dead. Now, therefore, arise. And can we say this all together? Arise. Come on, we can do better than that. Arise. Go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I'm giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I've given to you, just as I promised to Moses, from the wilderness and this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites to the great sea, towards the going down of the sun, shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. Can we say that all together? I will not leave you or forsake you. But then our part is, God says, my part is, I do not abandon what I've started. I'm going to be present. I'm going to be available. I'm going to be for you. I'm going to be with you. Only be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. I'm going to go ahead and read verse 7. Only be strong and very courageous. and be careful to do according to all the law that Moses, my servant, commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. And as we talk this morning about this text, I just want to declare over us that change and transitions are hard. And I can only imagine what it was like for Joshua in this moment, because they had been in this holding pattern for over 40 years. They had been under the leadership of a man who God had used in a powerful way, miracle worker, signs and wonders that had been unparalleled. God used him to break the power of the arrogance and pride of the greatest empire up to that point in time in human history. And here's this shepherd guy coming out of the wilderness just with a stick in hand, and he goes before Pharaoh's courts. And before it's all over, you have the capitulation, the breaking of the will of the greatest king alive at that time, and releasing hundreds of thousands of people who are building his kingdom. But he was willing to just say, get out of here. Matter of fact, don't just go. We're going to pay you to leave. It said when they left, they spoiled the Egyptians. But for 40 years, they had navigated this type of leadership, and Moses had been very faithful, and he had led them. But they had kind of been in this holding pattern. They had come out of where they were, but it was like they had not been able to go in. And so Moses has died, and now this transition of leadership, the weight of it comes upon Joshua. But I know that even though they knew that there was a next that was coming, they didn't know what that next really looked like. And they were also mourning the death of Moses. And so they were in a posture, and their hearts were positioned just in this place of saying, okay, now what's next? Where do we go from here? What do you have for us, God? And I've shared this before, but I'll just say it again to us. If I were the scribe that is going to transition from the life of Moses, the ministry of Moses, now to this new epic of history that they're going to be opening up of the history of Israel, I think that if I'm going to, write the first chapter of the book of Joshua, I'm going to spend about a chapter just going back through all of the accolades. If I'm writing Moses' obituary, I'm going to talk about the Red Sea. I'm going to talk about the confrontation with Pharaoh. I'm going to talk about turning the Nile red. Amen? I'm going to talk about taking and bringing water out of a rock. I'm going to talk about all of these miracles because I want people to have a confidence in their supernatural history. But God many times views transitions differently than we do. And sometimes they're abrupt. Sometimes there are the suddenlies of God. They break in upon us. And so instead of them spending, 15 verses talking about where they've been, God makes this very simple statement about Moses. Moses is dead. He was my servant. He obeyed my voice. He's dead. Let me re-paraphrase that in the Lynn Furrow translation. Joshua, I buried him. He's not coming back. Now get over it. Arise and get going. And so change and transitions are hard, and I believe that history is important, and we don't want to misunderstand that we think that our history has no benefit or there's no importance to what we've walked through. It's very important. And I appreciate that this church has like a 80-some year history, and we have a sister in our church that painstakingly has taken all the photos that have been taken. Sue Terry, if you ever see Sue at the second service, tell her thank you. And she archived all these milestones of this history for 80 some years of our church history. She has archived, and she just recently gave me her last album that she had. And I just flipped through it. And some of you look very different than you used to look. You've gotten a little grayer. Some of us have gained a little more weight, and some of us have lost some. But nothing stays the same. Now, for the sake of your notes, I want to give you the two benefits to our history. There are benefits to our history, and that is that if we do not learn or know our history, we're doomed to repeat it, because not all of our story is good. There have been lessons that we have learned, right? There are things that we've gone through, and not all of it's been positive, but we learn from our experience. And so they always say this adage, if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. They also say, if you don't know where you've been, you're not going to understand where you're going. And I believe that to be so as well. Our country is in a crisis because we are intentionally trying to change our story, our narrative as a nation. We're trying to cut loose from foundations and roots that have been there in our country. And because there are people, architects, that are trying to create a new country, and we're embarrassed about the good, bad, and the ugly of our history. We are just wanting to just abandon everywhere we've been. We want to abandon it and not embrace any of it. And I say this, whether it's been good, whether it's been bad, whether it's been ugly, it is our history, and we need to celebrate what's good and learn from that which is bad. But I found this out. God uses everything. He wastes nothing. And so that if I'm willing to learn from my mistakes, and if I have a reference point of this is my history and this is where God has brought me from, I can see that in that good, that bad, that ugly, that God wastes nothing, and He's going to use everything for good and for His glory. But there is a downside to history. We've got to learn from it. We've got to not forget about it, but use it as a reference point. But there is a downside to history. And specifically for the church, it's very important that our history, any part of our history, that we don't allow it to hold us hostage. You know, whether it's personally or whether it's corporately, you cannot allow any of our history, no matter how significant that moment in God was, or how significant this chapter of our church's history was, you cannot let it hold you hostage. And many churches, what they do is they end up getting frozen in time. It's like being freeze-framed. And so you go into the church and you realize they're living in an epic and a period of history, and they repeat that. They are reenactors of the 1950s, the 1960s, the 1970s, the 1980s, the 1990s. We have to follow the Lord no matter where He takes us, because we know He said, I'll be with you. I won't abandon you. I won't forsake you. I'm going to be with you in the new chapters that I'm going to write for you, and it's going to be good if you will be willing to follow me wherever I'm going. In Revelation, it says those that are sealed by the Lamb, it says there is this characteristic about the nature of those that God seals. It says they follow the Lamb wherever He goes. I love that. And so I want to be someone who celebrates the history, enjoys certain chapters, fondness of remembrance of our good times, great times in God. But I know that God is not a reenactor. The drama of God today has a different act. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And so the drama continues to unfold, and we've got to allow the Lord to cast us in the roles that he has for us as we live out the drama of God. There's another application. We know also that many times there have been pain points in our past, and the enemy wants to tether us to time, put us in bondage to an age to where we feel so ashamed that we're staked down to the ground, and there is a chain that we're connected to that event. And Jesus came to not only set us free from sin, but also the chain of shame that would want you to always remember that moment in your past defined you. No, it doesn't define you, because when you're translated into the kingdom and you become a part of a new creation, the chain of shame is broke off. Thank God for a dividing moment in history. When Jesus died on the cross, there were those things that were before Christ and those things that are now after the cross. We live in the age where everything is being made new, because this is now following the work of the cross. And so the Lord is wanting us to move forward into our future in faith. Not trying to drive looking through our rearview mirror. Right? Because you won't get very far. You'll run into something. And we want to continue to grow beyond a certain moment that would try to freeze frame us. Now, change is God's process to keep us growing and maturing. And everybody say the word process with me. Oh, I like the product. I like the product. I like what change produces after I'm through the change that the Lord wants to make. I really do enjoy the product, but I don't like the process. Because sometimes we assess how easy the change is going to be, only to find out that there is something hidden behind that wall when you're remodeling your house that you were unaware of, right? And so the work that has to be done through the process is much greater, and it stretches your endurance, and it stretches your capacity to endure till finally the process is complete. And many people, because they don't know that God uses processes, nothing is wasted, they give up on God because they don't like the process. They wanted instantaneous change. They wanted a quick result. But no, God keeps working and developing our faith. God keeps working on me. I am a construction zone constantly. In the spirit realm, we have a sign over us, and it says construction zone. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. God is still working on us. Thank God that God does not quit. He doesn't walk away. You go, when is this road going to get paved? As soon as the storm sewer's in, right? Sometimes you got to go underneath. You got to change things before you put something on top. But I want to get there quick. No, sometimes God has to go deep. He's got to rearrange the infrastructure so that you can go somewhere. And sometimes we compare ourselves with other people and we go, but look how far they got. Look how quickly they go. You don't understand the backstory there. You're only watching the moment of acceleration. And you're seeing now them being accelerated like rocket fuel that lifts them to a different orbit. But no, maybe they spent 40 years on the backside of a desert enduring patiently the processes of God to enlarge their faith to be able to receive a promise from God. And so don't compare yourself, because we're all in different places of the process. Now, I'm going to give you a quote of what I consider a secular prophet of our time, not a biblical prophet and not even a spiritual prophet. But I can remember I'm a lover of Westerns. Do I hear an amen? Yeah, that's appropriate, Mark. Yeehaw. I love Westerns because I love how certain characters in Westerns, there's no shades of gray. It's all black and white. It's law and justice, Wrong things are going to be made right at the end of the moment. And I remember there was a Clint Eastwood movie. Can I even say that name in church? A Clint Eastwood movie. And I can remember he was giving counsel to somebody, and he was sharing with them. He said, either get busy living or either get busy dying. I love that line. Because we have a choice. It has been set before us, life and death. We're either, unless we're embracing the processes of God and we're willing to allow God to take us through transitions and processes and changes, you're actually, in fact, dying. You're not really living. And so we either got to get busy living or dying. And sometimes churches and sometimes people, it doesn't look like they're dying, but they made a decision 2 years ago not to go for the gold in God. They made a decision not to press the envelope. They made a decision not to lean in. The persecution was great, or the resistance was too great. The spiritual warfare was too strong. And they just said, I'm going to back off. And even though it looks like they're still looking like they're living, actually they've been in a process of dying. It's only a matter of time till you see the result of the decision that they made 6 months or a year ago or 2 years ago. And so what we have to do is when God speaks to us that, hey, I want you to know a season has ended. Moses is dead. He's not coming back. I buried him. Joshua, you have to arise. It's very important that we take that type of instruction clearly. We must choose life every day. And so every day, this is the way I go after in God. Every day, I just say, Lord, I want to be led by your Spirit. I want to hear your voice. I don't want to harden my heart. There are circumstances that could brutalize me, and I have to harden myself to where the pain is not great in that experience. But I say, God, keep my heart tender, keep my heart willing, keep my heart ready, because I want to be able to obey you and to have you take me where you're wanting to take me. I don't want to live a life of excuses where I say, that's what I wanted to be, but I'm sorry I made the decision not to because it was just too hard. Okay, I thought this message would go over better than it is. Now, I've been reading a book. Trenton blessed me at Christmas, and I got a stack of books, to be honest with you. And so what I do is I just stack them up, and I just start reading one at a time. And to show you how, and I didn't do it in order, but Trenton gave me this book by Mark Batterson at Christmas, and it was called Chasing the Lion. And it's a great book. And again, I'm in a prophetic scenario, and what is amazing to me is that I had been reading some other, things that were challenging to me. And what was amazing was I just grabbed this book and I thought, I need to read this. I want to read this. And so I opened it up and God started speaking to me through this book. I mean, it was so relevant to me. And there was a section in this book that it was talking about the actual cost of things versus what business people call opportunity cost. Actual cost and opportunity cost. And it talked about how many businesses that we used to know. How many remember Blockbuster? billion-dollar business, 40,000 employees, and it looked like everybody would be renting DVDs, for forever. And they had an opportunity to purchase Netflix, which was this new technology of streaming videos for $50 million. But The smart people at Blockbuster said, we don't want to take $50 million and invest in Netflix because we don't think this technology is going to go anywhere. Because at that time, we have all these people coming to our Blockbuster stores. And actually now Netflix is worth, I believe they said, close to over $100 billion. And how many of you still go to the Blockbuster? The reason why you don't go to the Blockbuster is because they no longer exist. So they had an actual cost that they didn't want to invest $50 million. But actually, not only did it cost them not only a loss of opportunity, but there was a opportunity cost of growth and a progress in a field in which they had an opportunity to be a pioneer in. And now it cost those people billions of dollars. And so sometimes we look at only things as the actual cost, but we need to see opportunity lost. There is an opportunity cost when we choose not to go through transitions and change, when we refuse to allow God to bring us through the processes, to bring us into what He has for us. Now, God commands us to have courage to change. In this one passage of Scripture, and we're going to go beyond verse 7, but I believe all the way through verse 11, the Lord commands them repeatedly over and over again. And normally when the Lord repeats something, it's because He knows that we're going to struggle with what's ahead of us. The God who sees, who knows what lies ahead, He knows that could intimidate us. That means that we may be dealing with insecurity and inferiority. And that He knows that the enemy has used the fear of loss to keep people subject to bondage for their entire lifetime. He uses the fear of losing what we have. And so what we do is we end up clutching things and holding on to things too long, when there are certain things that we need to just hold loosely and to let go of so that God can bless us with what He has for us in the future. So God commands Joshua in this passage of Scripture to be strong and courageous, because there were going to be some giants. There were going to be some walls. Years ago, they had these spies come back and give a bad report. And that was a lingering legacy in their mind. Are we capable, even now, 40 years later, of being able to do what we didn't think we could do before? But God commanded them to be strong and courageous. Every command of God, I know, when God repeats it and He speaks to us, we must understand every command of God is accompanied by a corresponding grace or an empowerment of the Spirit to obey it. God does not issue out a command and say, I hope you can do that. Give it your best shot. Give it your best effort. No, there is a grace package to be strong and courageous. And what fuels the grace, the ability of God making it available to His people, is the revelation of the nature of God. And so God is telling Joshua to be strong and courageous, but behind the command, there is this revelation in the nature of God where He said, I will be with you all the days of your life. There's not going to be one moment of any day, even in your darkest day, most difficult day, where I am not there with you. Always remember, I am there. Come on, somebody say amen, whether you want to or not. He is there. Even on my darkest day, my most depressing day, the day I feel the most challenged, that is when God is able to break in His manifest presence to me and saying, I did not leave you or abandon you on this day. I am with you. I don't need to remember this on my good days. I need to remember it when I'm fighting in the valley and it's dark and difficult. He said, I will never leave you, nor will I forsake you. And He also said, I want you to be confident that as you take steps in obedience to me and you start going into new territory, that when you take a step, know that I've already been there. That's why I can give it to you, because I've already claimed it ahead of you. You're not venturing into this new territory, into this new season without the knowledge that I am going before you. I've already been there. That's why I'm going to welcome you to come in it. And every place that you put your foot upon, I want you to know I'm going to allow you to claim that as yours. As you lean into my grace to be strong and courageous. Now, I believe this. I believe that many of the grace packages that God has to empower our obedience, they are only released to us as we continue to ask, seek, and knock. I have never had a grace to fast until after I yielded in the obedience to say I'm going to begin a fast. I've never had the grace to pray until after I said, yes, God, I will begin to pray and to seek your face. Then when I entered into that season of prayer, I found out that there was a grace that was awaiting for me there. Fasting the same way. Financial things. And this is why we call it walking by sight or walking by faith instead of walking by sight. The Lord has spoken to me to move into arenas of generosity and giving, and I go, this does not add up in my checkbook, and I want you to assure me that when I obey you, that this is going to be the outcome. You will never know the outcome, the grace, the provision, the release of your giving until after you give. The command is to give. The release and the blessing from giving comes after the gift is given. It's amazing. And so, this grace to be strong and courageous was going to come to Joshua when he began to embrace the command to be strong and courageous. Now, grace is a provision that is released when the command is obeyed. Now, the second point I want to give you is we must have courage to change our posture. And there are various postures that we have, and we only, many times use it in a sense of physical posture, where if I've been told once, I've been told 100 times by my mother, hey, sit up straight. I tell my kids as Karis right now, she likes to watch things on the iPad, and I just noticed there is this curving of the neck. And I just tell her, sit up straight and put it out in front of you and watch it. If you're going to watch something, I don't want you to change your posture, but there is a spiritual posturing. There's an emotional posturing. There's a mental posturing that we must maintain. And so, obviously, the wilderness and the wilderness wanderings had conformed their posture from moments of temporary movement, but then settling down where they would graze the cattle and the sheep, and they would just stay there a while. Maybe from oasis to oasis, maybe from one pasture land to another. But they were not constantly on the move. They would get up and they would move a little and then they would sit down. Basically, they lived a sedentary lifestyle in the wilderness, from watering hole to watering hole. They were killing time out there in the desert. But then God tells Joshua, I want you to change your posture. I want you to arise. And maybe they were stuck on grief so much that they could not get off the fact that Moses was gone. And so that's why there was such brevity in this statement. Moses, my servant, is dead. Arise. You're going to have to do something different than what you've been doing. Arise, Joshua. And he tells him to rise and go over. And I want you to, this is the irony of this moment. This man has only been there one time before. And the other time that he had been there, it was both a positive and negative experience. It was positive because he saw a land, the potential of the land flowing with milk and honey. But it was the other guys that were with him, that were around him. And some of the guys were going, look at this, at the potential. And then other guys were picking out that, hey, even though they're great, produce here, and there's great land here, and there are things, the potential there. But there were others, all they could do is see the problems instead of seeing the opportunity. And so we know what happened. 2 of them said, let us go up at once and possess the land. The rest of them said, we are like grasshoppers. We're so small. We can't qualify to do this, as if their own qualifications were going to get them there. The only way that they could get there is by God and God's power. And so they had developed a wilderness lifestyle. But now God commands them to arise. And so God abruptly tells Joshua not to get stuck in the pain of the past, of the loss of Moses, but to rise, get up, and to get ready. And so we've got to change our posture, but then we also have to have, in other words, we've got to get ready. How many of you live with an expectation that God can do anything at any time? And I know sometimes when we've been going through cycles and circles and seasons of waiting, and it looks like destiny has been delayed, I know how hard it is to keep yourself on the cutting edge, to keep your senses sharpened and to be alert and ready and to be standing up, looking with an expectation of the salvation of God. I love how Paul, in another passage of Scripture, when he talked about the armor of God in Ephesians, he only says, take upon yourself the helmet of salvation. But to the Thessalonian believers, he said, I want you to put upon your thinking cap. I want you to put upon your head the hope, the anticipation, and the expectancy of the salvation of God. And so it's not just about what God has done, but what God is doing, but then also anticipating what God is going to do. That's anticipating His interventions in our life. I love that. God comes down and breaks into time and space and says, now, this is a Kairos moment. I want you to rise. I want you to get ready. I want you to be looking. I want you to prepare yourself. I want you to get ready. And I could do my best T.D. Jakes impersonation with that, but I'll resist. No, I won't. Get ready, get ready, get ready, get ready, get ready. No, we want to be ready, right? Because sometimes the Lord comes, and He comes in a moment in which it requires our movement. And unless you're arising, you won't be ready to move. So I want to tell our church, arise, get ready. Stir up your anticipation. Stir up your expectation. Start looking. Prepare yourself. What is the Lord going to need from you in regards to your faith to be able to be released for all that the Lord has for us? And then that leads to us having an ability to have courage to move. And that means that we may not know all the movements ahead of us, but we may know just the next step. But He said, wherever the sole of your foot treads upon, I have given it to you. Now, if you would, go to the next slide. And I want us to go over and look at this passage of Scripture. So Matthew chapter 7, verses 7 through 11, He says, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open to you. And I'm just going to say something about Mary Hawkins. Mary serves on our council, and we've been in more meetings lately than normally we have, because we're in a challenging season in the life of our church. And I appreciated one thing that Mary spoke up, and I appreciate moments where, you know, in all your discussions and all your calculations and all of your exchanges of ideas and things like that, I thank God when God breaks in and there is a voice that comes, and it's the Holy Spirit that comes to a person, and there's clarity. And I appreciated Mary saying this. She said, we need to keep knocking. You know, sometimes you'll never know if the door gets open Because it may be that the person is coming down the stairs to open the door. But if you knock and there is not an immediate answer, it could be that simply the person is trying to get to the door to open it to you, but because you're so quick to receive it as rejection, when the door doesn't swing open immediately and wide, instantaneously, some of you take it, well, this door is not going to, and I appreciated Mary said, keep knocking. And here, Jesus, teaching his disciples, he said, I want you to develop a lifestyle. When he talks about this, he bundles all three together of us having this ability to be ready, but also to be in movement with the Lord. So how many are curious? How many are inquisitive? How many are always looking for God? How many are always saying, where are you at, Lord? Where are you working? What are you doing? Where are you at, God? Come out wherever you are. I know that you're a God that likes to hide so that you can surprise. You don't hide because you don't want to be found. You hide to surprise your people. But the ones and the kids that you surprise are the ones that do not give up in the search, do not give up in the inquiry, do not allow their spiritual boredom to overtake them, but they still have this curious spirit, this seeking spirit that wants to find out what God is hiding and concealing from us. So Jesus said, I want you to be an asker, and I want you to keep on asking. This is in the aorist tense. It means that don't just frame the request once. If you don't feel that your request was framed in an appropriate way, reframe it. Ask it in a different way. Listen, I have given more things to my kids on the third or the fourth request simply because they reframed the same request and repackaged it in a different way. And it's pretty hard to resist pretty please with sugar on top. You mean Daddy gets a kiss and a hug out of this? Yeah, Daddy. I'll give you a kiss and a hug. Pretty please with sugar on top. It's like, I changed my mind. I changed my mind. I was going to say no. Now you've caused me to be thinking about that I want to say yes. And then finally, yeah, okay, yes. Now come over here and give me a hug and a kiss. I'm so desperate to be kissed and loved by you. He said, ask, keep seeking, keep knocking. But many times when we read this verse, we're so familiar with it, we've memorized it, but we don't see the connection between 7, 8, and then verse 9. Because the God that is going to open the door, the God that is going to allow hidden things to be found, the God who is going to surprise us with suddenlies of God, he says this, which one of you, if his son asks for bread, will he give him a rock? Or if he asks for a fish, will he give him a snake? If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give you good things to those that ask him? Whenever we go by faith into the unknown and we don't know all of the variables out there and we can't guarantee or assure all the incomes because we only see in part, know in part, and we don't know all the future, this is what we can bank on. Verse 9, 10, and 11. If God opens up a door and if he makes a way where there seemed to be no way, on the other side of that Red Sea experience, on the other side of Jordan, on the other side of the valley, you can find out that God is not waiting there with a bag of rocks for you. He is not going to be there giving you a bunch of snakes. It is going to be really good what God has prepared for those that love him. You can rely upon his character and upon his nature. Now I got to go quickly, and I'm going to finish this by saying that when we obey God's commands and he empowers us to be courageous in grace, and we're willing to start changing posture and we begin to start moving forward, then this is what happens. Courage becomes contagious. And this is where I want to land the plane today. There is a very interesting phrase in the English Standard Version that I want us all to get. And it says this: And I got to find the reference here. Calculating. Okay, verse 6. God repeats the command, be strong and courageous. But then there is this phrase, for you shall cause this people. I have found that fear is contagious. So if I start functioning in fear, and I get out of love and not relying on God's power, and all of a sudden I allow the enemy in fear to scatter all my thoughts, and I'm getting the worst case scenarios all figured out of how bad it could be if God is not on the other side of Jordan. So when God comes to us and say, now be strong and courageous, you're going to be challenged. Your faith is going to be challenged. You're going to be stretched. You're going to be changed in this experience. But know that I'm with you and I'm not going to forsake you, and I'm going to give you this land. When we begin to say, okay, I receive your grace to be courageous, the courage in you inspires courage in others. And this is the role of leadership. And leadership is not just for a few people that have titles. We all exhibit influence. We all are leaders. And we need to all flow in to a moment of courage, where we rise up and we say, okay, we will arise and we'll begin to move forward in the grace of God. Now, we've got about 2 minutes, and I want to just kind of update you over some of the recent history. And again, I can't share everything because it's not time to share fully. But over the last year, 2 years, we have just gone through just a process of trying to figure out what to do in regards to expanding on this church building. And I remember 2 years ago, we put out a plan that we would just keep this church the same, convert it into fellowship hall, children's education, to where we wouldn't be tearing a bunch of stuff out, but we were just going to build a new auditorium. And so the price came back in, and it was kind of a sticker shock. And so we just said, we're going to refine this down, shrink it down, and there's an amount of money that we would want to invest here. And so we've been going through a bidding process, and we even got a smaller scaled project, just 7,400 square feet. We were going to just take out the back wall, add a little bit, add more seating here, and then just give a little more education space and some offices. Primus, who built our original building here, came back in. The bid was $1.9 million. And when he said that at the meeting, he goes, you guys are receiving this much more graciously than what I thought you would. Now, on the outside, I was very calm. On the inside, I was saying, who's got a rope? Who's got a rope? I want to hang somebody, I was stunned. I couldn't believe it, because we were told, just based on square footage cost, that we should look at about $200 per square feet. And we were even given lower amounts than that. But it came in at $240 per square feet. And so I remember coming into the elders council meeting and said, we just got to put everything on the table. Because there is this thing of how much do you invest here before, if you only get so much expansion, but you're paying premium price for it, should you invest $2 more million on this site? And so I just said, we've just got to say, Lord, every time we come here, it seems like there's complexity and complication. We just got to put everything on the table. And so I started looking online, and so we viewed the Red Cross building. We even looked at a bowling alley, and I immediately ruled that one out, because I thought that while I'm in here preaching, I could hear some people going, "Whoa, I got a strike!" And I thought, man, I'm not going to deal with them out there bowling, No, we just realized, old building, we would end up putting 1 million, 1.5 just to even get it up to par. So we looked at a couple buildings, and it's just like, Lord, this is just, premium dollars, premium price. And then we had other bids come in, and one guy come in at 1.78, I think it was. And then finally, we got one that was getting more close, 1.2, 1.3. But he left a lot of exclusions out, no parking lot, no other double doors. And so when we looked at what the city was going to require us to do, it was about $500,000 before we ever put a beam up or put a floor in or before we did anything. We had about $500,000 of infrastructure. And so it was like, Lord, what do we do? And then somebody came up to Kenny Crooks at work and said, I hear your church is growing. And our church is going to be coming up for sale. And so Kenny came in. We were actually looking at some equipment. We had a special meeting to have a demonstration on some equipment, and Kenny shared. And so the elders and council took 2 groups of leaders through this church building. I will say this, can't tell you where it is, can't tell you who it is, but 23,000 square feet, 18 acres, an auditorium that seats 400. And then we were told the price, and immediately I just wanted to go, well, that was nice. Got a nice little tour. Yeah, we're back to the drawing board. But it looks like that we could buy that building because they continue to lower it because they have to sell it, that literally we could buy it for what we would do for an expansion here. Now, we would have to sell our building, but for the price of what we were looking at an expansion, we possibly could get it. Now, there's many hoops and steps, and again, it's gone from impossible to improbable to a possibility. But what we do feel like the Lord is saying to us, keep knocking. And so when we got this price back, I think all of us were stunned because literally there's a possibility they could give us a gift of an equity of about $1 million. And so there is this thing where we're just saying, okay, God, you obviously are having us in a process. Now, what I want to share that looks like, we're meeting tomorrow night, elders and council meeting, even on Labor Day. So your council and eldership is hard at work, right? We're even going to meet but we've got to lay out a process. And what that process would look like is we want to have some open houses. We want to take our congregation through. We want to have then kind of a meeting where we can gather and just talk about the process of what that could look like. But we do have to, by our bylaws, we have to have a vote of the membership to move forward. And the council has to have a vote, and they have to recommend it. And the council hasn't recommended it yet to the congregation. But I just felt like I needed to just share a fuzzy photo, because we don't have a clear picture yet. But just in conversations that we've had with them, it looks like this door is opening for us. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you to stay tuned. I want us to really lean in for the rest of this fast. Fasting and prayer, because it is working. When God's people lean into the grace of God and we begin to seek His face, because the Lord really wants to solve for us our problems. And you go, well, the first service, there's a lot of chairs empty. Stay around for second service. And we are going to, if God does not lead us out, we're going to have to go to 3 services. Because unless we get a bunch of people that are willing to come to first service, we've got to have a third service to accommodate some of our younger families with children. So we are really in need of breakthrough. We really are. Okay, that's my update. If you have any questions, you can't ask them now. Because everybody would just say, can't share with you that yet. I really want to, and I know you're curious, but stay tuned. And what we'll do is after the elders council meeting and we get some more facts, we'll craft a letter for the entire church and explain some of the details and some of the dates when we can all go through this together. Okay, stand with me.